Welcome, I'm Hernan Murdoch. In this episode, we're going to take a closer look at audit findings and the attributes that we need to consider incorporating in the documentation for those items. To help us better understand the ingredients that go into the documentation of audit findings, we have with us today Kathleen Crawford. Kathleen, welcome.
Hi, Hernan. How are you?
I am well, thanks. We would like a little bit more information in terms of how to document audit findings and what are some of the ingredients that go into that documentation. So, what needs to be included as we're documenting the elements that go into what the findings all about?
Okay, well, we have two different acronyms depending on which you prefer. The first one is called CCCER. So, where first C is criteria. The first thing that we need to be certain we have a good understanding of and therefore documented is what should exist. So, is there a standard against which the area should operate? Is there some kind of expectation? Is there some kind of threshold? So, what do the procedures, what do the policies say in terms of how this thing is supposed to operate? The
Okay.
second thing is what are the facts as we have found them, as we have seen them in the audit work that we have done. So that's the condition, the criteria and the condition. If everything is working well, we expect that the condition will absolutely mirror the criteria. And if that's the case, we don't have an issue. We don't have a finding. So we don't even have to activate this acronym. However, if things are not working as expected, then we have to proceed. And that's with the third C, cause. What is the difference? What is causing this breakdown or this alternate way of things happening other than what we expected? So
What's the
cause,
reason?
yeah, what's the reason? What's the reason for
Mhm.
that difference? And it is no accident that we have the word cause here, because chances are, in order to figure out what has gone wrong, what has come out of balance, and why, we may need to do some additional work. Some people call that root cause analysis. And sometimes auditors are going to have to do a little bit of digging, do a little bit of research and investigation, maybe even do more testing. So it's really important that we get these things nailed down so that by the time we finish our work, we do all the necessary work to better understand what is really going on, not just what we think is going on, but what is really going on.
Okay. Mhm.
So you know, Hernan, that I do have a personal passion for root cause analysis as well, and I just think that it makes a world of difference in terms of the quality of the work that we do as auditors.
I agree entirely. And I believe that the key issue that a lot of auditors run into is that if they don't do enough root cause analysis or dig deeply enough into it, that they may stop at the point of just looking at the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
And that will limit the quality of the communication and what happens subsequently in terms of what needs to be fixed. Because as we know in general life dynamics, that if you're only dealing with the symptoms and the root cause is not addressed, the problem will recur.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things we want to avoid. So, absolutely, root cause analysis is really important to this equation as well.
So I'll use another visual for our viewers, and imagine that we didn't follow through with root cause analysis, and we made a recommendation that maybe brought down the occurrence a little bit, but then as you say, it pops up again. So the visual I want you to have, folks, is Whack-A-Mole, the arcade game. We might
Mhm.
close off one instance of where the problem persists, but we may not be taking care of more global issues. So
Right.
having this to guide us should be a signal to when we need to do more work.
Exactly.
Then moving on, we want to also be able to articulate consequences. So what's the effect of the gap or the difference between criteria and condition? So we have effect, there's the CCCE, and then you have R, or consequence. So what? So what? How big a deal is this? We need to think in terms of impact, effect, consequence, that whatever this difference, whatever this reason is bringing about. And finally, corrective action. Corrective action or recommendation. What are we recommending to management in terms of what they should change, how they should address this underlying issue, what is going to bring about a better balanced situation or return a situation to normal? Maybe something went awry because of conditions at that point and can be returned to normal. So CCCER, are the 5 C's. We want management's action plan through our recommendation to them to be sufficient and up to the task of putting things aright.
And what I've found as well is that if the auditor doesn't spend enough time getting into depth with each one of these 5 elements, that it may not be convincing enough to the management team that something is not right. And the fourth one that you mentioned, which is the consequence or the effect, if you cannot answer this so what eloquently enough to yourself, much less being able to articulate it to management, they may not see why this is a real problem. So we need to not only show that there is an issue, but how significant it is so that it can compel action. So the idea of selling the finding is an integral part of this dynamic as well. It's not just that we want to document that there's an issue, but we want to be able to also capture the severity of the issue so that it can be compelling enough and convincing enough that they'll do something about it. And this idea of selling audit findings, I think it's a very interesting way of articulating this idea, this dynamic, that we really want them to be able to be convinced that they need to do something. This is serious.
Yes, it is. And, and the flip side of that is that we don't want to bring incidental things to their attention. We don't expect them to have to read in an audit report that maybe a small issue hadn't been addressed. So we will also want to make sure that we only bring into their sight line things that are significant enough to deserve being reported, that we have the facts and the evidence, to your point, that it is sufficient, it's reliable, it's relevant, and it's useful. And that usefulness is what I want to zero in on, because it absolutely echoes what you said. What's the significance? Why does it matter? Why should I care? And if we can be tangible in the language with which we support this information and facts, are we talking about monetary loss? How much? What proportion? How many dollars? Is there some error that's even risen to the level of violating some very important law or regulation? What's the impact? What's the possible reputational risk? So things of that sort really need to be part of that documentation of facts and evidence. That evidence has to be sufficient, reliable, relevant, and useful, and in our working papers to be examined by anybody who feels they need to look at them.
Absolutely.
Objective development. So none of us should have an axe to grind. We all work for the same organization. Let's make sure that our development of these issues is objective. And then your recognition of that selling being an interesting way of putting things, but it's compelling and convincing enough to compel action.
Right. Yes. In terms of develop objectively too, the other thing here is as much as possible, make sure it is factual, right? That's why part of what we do is research-based. We're collecting information, whether it is sampling or 100% or population testing. But you want facts, figures. You want information that is going to give you that logical, objective presentation of this is what's happening. So that will also help tremendously to make sure that it's not viewed just as your opinion. Your opinion is driven by the understanding of the facts behind it, and you can support it. So as far as collecting all of this information then, and we're thinking in terms of, okay, now we've done all this work, we need to communicate it to the stakeholders who are going to take action.
Right.
So what are some of the key things we need to keep in mind as relates to communicating the findings?
Well, then I'd say we need to look at this graphic. Findings absolutely have to be discussed before being included in a report. So there should be some people like to call it socializing period. There should be an opportunity for us to discuss and debate for them to be aware of these issues long before the final communication goes around. So there's an opportunity for not only discussion, but debate and hopefully agreement before we get to the audit report. The facts should be agreed upon. So we may not agree on the impact, but we should agree on the facts, absolutely. Another thing that it may surprise some of our viewers, I hope not, is that you may be complimentary. We want to put this in context with all the things that are going well and going right. Even though there are issues that need to be addressed, we're not painting this with a black brush that everything is dark and stormy. That's not the case. We want to be complimentary when that's not the case.
Want to be fair and balanced in our
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So that point is right here too. Findings should be put into perspective, fair and balanced. In terms of the recommendations that we make, consider the cost and the benefit. You had alluded to this before, Hernan, when you were talking about how some things of a significant risk, maybe we just have to bite the bullet and invest the funds to get it done because the cost, or rather the benefit of getting that gap closed is so necessary. So when we bring these ideas forward, we want to have some sense of how much is lost and how much is gained by following through with the recommendation.
Excellent. Yes.
It's also useful for our viewers to understand that there are many different reporting styles for audit reports and for memos around these issues. So we want to acknowledge that no single reporting style works for all. And in the end, balance what you say with how it looks and how it is said. Be careful of tone, be careful of how people are going to receive it. Be careful of what their concerns are in terms of their stakeholders around them. And so think about how you're going to be not politically correct, but certainly politically sensitive. If we discuss things ahead of time and we don't put something out before everyone is on the same page, then that's a much better way to create that partnership with management as opposed to creating a gap between us and them.
These are great suggestions, and the guidelines are very clearly stated, so we have a better understanding of how we need to proceed. So as we do all this work and we identify discrepancies from what is expected to what is actually happening, and the CCCER model definitely very helpful, very simple, but really helps us organize our thoughts and present it in such a way that is going to hopefully be persuasive and it's going to compel action. So thank you very much, Kathleen. I really appreciate your help today.
Thank you, Hernan.
If you like this series, subscribe to the ACI Learning YouTube channel to enjoy more audit-related content.